Hello, everyone. Welcome to another interview here. We've got an awesome interview today. I'm super excited. So, we are talking with Ginger Bill, otherwise known as Bill. He is the creator of Odin, which is an awesome programming language with some pretty lofty goals. One of them being able to be a better alternative to C, which we all know has some
Hmm.
security implications, memory leaks, that sort of thing. So Odin will, excuse me, Ginger Bill here will give us a short introduction about himself, and then he'll give a more thorough introduction about the Odin programming language, and then I've got some questions for him, and then after that, it will be a fantastic day.
Yes, thank you.
Take it away.
Hi, I'm Ginger Bill, and thank you very much, Joshua, for doing this interview with me. Anyway, so I am Ginger Bill, the creator of the Odin programming language. The Odin programming language is designed with the intent of creating an alternative to C, and I've tried to do it as an alternative to C on high-performance modern systems. But one of the essence of programming is I want to still keep that joy that you have when you try and do with programming, and you don't have to worry and have all the issues with it, but you want the joy, but also the simplicity. The Odin project now for this language is nearly 5 years old officially. I started it one evening late in July 2016, and I was getting really annoyed with C++. When I first started the language, it was pretty much a Pascal clone. I even had the begin and end everywhere, but it quickly changed to be something quite different. But to understand why I started the language, I'd have to go to the beginning of that year where I set myself a New Year's resolution. So any personal project that I start would have to be in C, plain old bog standard C. And the reason why I did that was to say, what do I actually want from a language, and find out what I wanted. And I found out not much at all. I don't need much to be productive. So after about 3 months of using C, I started experimenting, like making some modifications. I pretty much made my own extended C compiler, adding new features to like deferred or slices and nested declarations and such. But I found very, very quickly C is a broken language, very broken, and you cannot fix it. So you pretty much have to make a new language. Yeah. So that's how Odin came about.
Okay, can you expand upon that? So what you just said, C is a broken language. What
Yes.
is wrong with C? Or in other words, why can't we all just become little Linuses?
No, it's a very good question. But C itself there is a C specification, but effectively C is defined by its compilers. And because that means C is not one language, that's fine. That's not necessarily an issue, but that is how it works in practice. But C is... its type system is quite dodgy to begin with. It has many things where it's got a lot of implicit conversions going on, in the set cases, many different issues going to be popping up from that alone. But in general, there's a lot of undefined behavior in the language itself, which many people will exploit, or you cannot exploit because you can have all these different issues. And undefined behavior is a very catch-all term, unfortunately, in C and C++ as well, where it can mean literally anything. Like, for instance, integer arithmetic is undefined in C, because C used to support 1's complement and 2's complement machines. Yes, so you have to remember that even some of the basic things are completely undefined. Yes, nowadays we just assume 2's complement, but even in C, if you do overflow or underflow wrapping in general, that's undefined. So many compilers will exploit that and take advantage, and I'm doing that in inverted commas, what they can do with that. So there's many of these little things where you could try and fix them one by one, but then you won't be having C anymore. So I've done a hell of a lot of research looking into many different languages, looking back at Pascal, which is pretty much similar age to C in general, looking at maybe even Oberon as well, which is a bit older Pascal, Go, just C in general, and Python, and so many hundreds of different languages, and research and see what is the essence of make them good, and what could I learn from that through language design.
Okay. That's an awesome calling and an awesome goal to have. That must be so much fun researching all that stuff.
It was, yes.
Okay. So what do you suppose? What's wrong with Rust? I've heard a lot of people talk about rewriting in Rust. It's got a lot of memory safety features. I think it has some parallelism built into the language. It's got a lot of the features, C doesn't have. Why can't we just use Rust?
Well, one of the things that you pointed out there is Rust is what its main goal is trying to be safe. And it does safety through its ownership semantics and lifetime semantics, which is, if you know modern C++, it's called move semantics. Same idea. The issue is Odin, I do not have that goal. I'm not trying to be a safe language. I'm just being a language that's highly performant. But by doing certain things that more modern languages do, you actually become a hell of a lot safer than C. Like a very good example is in C, you have pointer arithmetic. Because in C, pointer arithmetic is useful because in C, there's not really a concept of like an array or array reference. Yes, you do have array types, but they automatically demote to a pointer. So then when you access an index on a pointer, you can treat it as if it's an array. That alone is a huge issue when it comes to language design. So if you have the concept of a actual like slice or array reference or whatever you want to call it in your language, that would actually clear up a lot of issues, again, that were unsafe in C, but not safe in unsafe in other languages. So that's one area. But again, Rust's focus is on safety, not necessarily performance. Even if it is very high performance systems in general, it abstracts a lot of weight because it wants to be safe. So a good example of this is in Rust, you don't really have, and people are going to be very pedantic here, but you don't really have manual memory management in the same way that you don't really can have custom allocators everywhere. And when you do, and you do try to use it, you're usually bypassing all of the ownership semantics and such, which means you're actually losing a lot of the safety. So to actually go there to be very high performance, you're actually losing what the abilities of Rust. So Rust does a lot automatic memory management for you, but a compile time, not a runtime. If that makes any sense.
No, totally. So, I mean, essentially, Rust and Odin just have different goals.
Yes, very much so, yeah. And again, I always recommend people check out languages as much as see which language, and a language at the end of the day is just a tool which is best for the problems you have at hand. So if you really think Rust is perfect for you, go and use Rust. That's what I recommend.
Okay. Really quickly, you were talking about some of the older languages like Pascal.
Yes.
When I think I was reading through your FAQ, I think you were saying that you got some inspiration from older programming languages.
Yes.
I guess the young, silly male in me likes to think that's silly. Why would you get inspiration from old languages? Would you mind poking holes in that for me?
Well, this is the thing, is a lot of people forget that actually a lot of the problems have already been solved by older things. They just, yeah, like many things like in general, like it's like, oh, so one of my favorites language designers is Niklaus Wirt, or if you want to say it in American, Nicholas Wirth. He is a Swedish programmer. He designed Pascal. He is the creator of Pascal. He is also well known for many books. For instance, I've got some on my shelf right now. Right, one of them here is one of my favorites, which is Algorithms plus Data Structures equals Programs. This book is a brilliant thing for beginners. I usually recommend it if you can get your hands on it more. It's from the 70s. There's another one as well, which is Systematic Programming and Introduction. These are very good books and stuff like that. He's one developer also did Pascal. He did the Oberon language and compiler and operating system. It's a very good thing if you want to learn how to make operating systems as well. He's done that because most of his stuff when he designed it was for teaching mainly, but a lot of things was very interesting with the design. Like back in the day, he was one of the chaps who was telling people to use recursive descent parsers just everywhere. And the thing is, they're now pretty much the bog standard thing, and I still use them all the time as well. So I've learned a hell of a lot from him, especially with regards to compiler design and also language design. And also another person I wrote on there, I was an inspiration, is Rob Pike, which I know people have controversial views about him, but at the end of the day, I think he's a very brilliant language designer and such. Most people know him for the Go programming language, but he has created many languages in the past for many different purposes and tools. And many of them, again, have influenced the way I've actually programmed and designed Odin itself.
Okay. This is actually getting really fun, like taking notes as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess the third question I had for you, Ginger Bill, is, what do you feel about some of your competitors in the terms of young alternatives to C? Zig comes to mind. I guess Scopes is a
yes.
Lambda scheme kind of implementation, not scheme, but it looks
yes. I know what you mean. Yeah.
And then you've also got Drew DeVault has a secret programming language. Drew DeVault, of course, wrote the Sway window manager, which is what I'm running on my computer now.
Yeah.
How do their goals differ from yours for the language?
Interesting. We've all kind of got different philosophies. That's the first thing you need to understand. I always recommend everyone literally try out as many languages things. I know Andrew Kelly, which is the creator of Zig language already, and people recommend Zig. I know, I call him Panic. I don't know what he's going by these days now, the creator of Scopes. I know of the DeVault's secret programming language, but the problem is it's not public yet, so I can only judge by what's on the blog post, so I cannot give it a fair criticism, being critical, not so positive or bad in that regards. So they've all got kind of different philosophies behind them, and as a result, they have very different feels to use in a programming, and certain people prefer one or the other. Odin itself is pretty much a, hey, look, what are the actual problems that people have most of the time? Okay, design around them. So Odin has built-in data structures. For instance, okay, I've got array types. I've got arrays, slices, dynamic arrays built into language, even though they use custom allocators, so you have high control. You also have enumerated arrays, which means the key itself is an enum, which means you can do some pretty cool stuff with it. And it's very, very useful. There's also a dynamic map built into the language as well. Again, these seem like very high-level features, but they can be very designed to be very high performance. But again, these are things like, okay, this is what the people want. Okay, there's a well-defined concept of what a package is in the language. There is many different things which, okay, they're designed in there. You can go lower if you need to, and you can make your own. But there's a general convention of what things are. Conventionalities in the people are used to how these things work, and also defined some general conventions. Zig, on the other hand, is probably a little bit more unconventional in both senses. It's as in, it's a bit different to how everyone else does things, and it's less defining conventions and allows you to have basic building blocks and build up. So it's this general idea of, do you want the tools in front of you, that are just general for 99% of your tasks, or do you want to have the tools to build your other tools? And it's a very different way of thinking. Different people think different way, so it'll be one better than the other for someone else, if that's clear.
No, yeah, very. Okay. Thanks for that explanation. That makes a whole lot of sense. So the next question I had for you, on your FAQ, I noticed that you currently use LLVM to translate code to platform-specific code. You also write that a custom backend is in development. What's its status? And forgive me because I'm not a very super technical guy. Is this backend the same thing as being self-hosted?
Okay, so there's three things there to break down. So currently the main backend is LLVM. There was work on a custom one when I was writing the FAQ, but that's been pretty much abandoned for the time being because focusing just on LLVM, so you have one main backend which you know is very well polished, and make sure that's very well developed for everyone else. When with this more time and generally just better more resources as well, especially manpower, then we can probably work on a custom backend. As for self-hosting, on the FAQ, it's the very last thing I actually state, and many people ask me, is the Odin compiler self-hosted? My personal view, which has been the same literally from day one, is Odin is not currently self-hosted, but it won't be until after version 1.0 is out of the language. This is when there's a main implementation of the compiler which is stable, and that implementation adheres to a written specification of the language and is heavily tested. Because doing it before then, in general, my personal view is, if you want a self-hosting language before a stable language, and compiler even exists, it's just masturbatory pleasure. Like, all you're doing is you're just not doing anything really productive. I know there are benefits to having it, but it's my personal view is there is better things to do with your time. Yes. Please tell me you do stand-up on the weekends. That was hilarious. No, I don't know.
Oh, gosh. Fair enough. Yeah. Well, just throwing a thought out there. I don't know if you're familiar with, I think it's called Reproducible Builds, or maybe bootstrappable.org, something like that. In the GNU Geeks language, they're actually recommending, when you write a programming language, please don't write the compiler in the programming language. It makes it tough to port to other platforms. I know Zig has a way of bootstrapping the compiler, and they intend to keep that going for the foreseeable future. Yeah, Zig's approach is very, if they want bootstrapping, it's kind of a sense approach. They have stages like stage 0, 1, 2, and stuff like that, where the different stages bootstrap each other.
So eventually and I think Zig eventually will be mostly bootstrapped soon. I think Andrew's plan in the next 7 months, most of the uncompile will be completely written in Zig, which is very, very impressive in that regard. But he is relying on the bootstrapping process, where Odin's more conservative approach. Like, okay, when we've got 1.0, then we can worry about writing in the language, because we know the compiler's stable. We know it's going to be fine. We don't have to do all those horrible tricks. If anyone's ever done bootstrapping in compiler, is that if you've got a bug, well, you've got to make a bug to fix the bug, and then you've fixed the bug. It's kind of like, I understand. I've done it before. It's quite sometimes fun to do, but it's not really a good idea. So I don't usually recommend people doing it unless you just want to do it for fun, for obvious reasons.
Sure. I'm actually kind of curious to see if Zig's compiler and your compiler and other C alternatives, if they're writing their own language, in themselves. Like, I wonder, is there going to be something that's going to compete against LLVM that it's just written in a faster language than C++? That'll be interesting, I think.
Well, I think LLVM is not inherently so because it's C++, of course. It's just the style that it's been written in. There's going to be many issues because LLVM, for Odin at least, the biggest bottleneck in the Odin compiler is LLVM. For the average build, it's probably at least 2/3 to 3/4 of the entire compile time.
Wow.
If not more, for large systems. For instance, one of the large projects I work on, it takes up 90% of the compile time, which is showing you how slow LLVM can be. And there are tricks to speed it up as well, but it is a big bottleneck, especially if you don't want something that's heavily optimized yet. If you're doing a release build, then I don't really care how long it takes usually. But if it's a development build or a debug build, then I want it to be a bit quicker. But there's that's kind of the thing, is where LLVM, I'm going to say LLVM and GCC are probably the two big ones at the moment, where they've got heavily optimized backends and they can give you very, very good code. And competing with that is going to be very difficult. You're going to need tens of millions of dollars to do that, because you're going to need a lot of people to actually get to that skill. You can get pretty close to it, by the way, but you're still going to need a lot of time and resources. So if you're only caring about another backend which is easy to implement and also maybe portable and also just fast to compile, not necessarily optimized code, then that is very much doable. I know Zig is trying to do that as well with its bootstrapping process, and I know a few other languages are doing it as well. That's not a plan currently for Odin, but it is a plan eventually in the future, for definite.
Okay, very cool. So forgive me for being a bit of a GNU fanboy.
Yeah, no problem.
I've actually got like a homemade bleached T-shirt of like RMS on the back and GNU on the front. I'm about as big as a fanboy as you can get. So why would you say most new programming languages, at least that I'm seeing, why do they seem to target LLVM as the back end? Is LLVM just better than GCC, or does LVM MIT's licensing just help a lot?
So there's actually a few aspects here. So one is definitely licensing. Many people do not like the GNU licenses because it's viral, and because of that virality, it's very big issues. It's one of the reasons why I didn't do Odin. Odin's license is the BSD clause once, the BS2D clause, two clause. I've always preferred the BSD ones for other reasons, other than MIT, because you can always just add and remove clauses. That's the main reason. But the other reason is that at the time, LLVM you can actually use as a library, and GCC wasn't really designed that way. Because GCC is very old. It's probably 30 years old at this point, if not more. I can't. Whenever it was created, it's probably about that. And the issues with that is that it's got a lot of cruft in it, and because there's a lot going in there, it doesn't mean it doesn't produce bad or good quality code. It does produce a lot of code, and also it supports a lot more targets than LLVM does. It just means that integrating that into a pre-existing workflow is not going to be easy. While LLVM is much easier in that regard. It's still not necessarily brilliant, but it's a lot easier. And then another point is that LLVM does have some benefits compared to GCC with regards to optimizations. LLVM has got some of the best auto-vectorizing optimizations in there compared to GCC, but GCC's got some hell of a lot much better ones, especially for tail recursion optimizations. LLVM's is awful in comparison, but it's a very good. It's like GCC's is very huge and optimized, and it's like, okay, it can do a lot of tail call optimizations. It's like, yeah, it knows what it's doing.
So I definitely like it when you're talking nerdy to me.
Yes. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah.
I was like, I know what telecom optimization is. Yes,
Don't
I got
worry.
one.
Don't worry about that. That's me. I'm just talking about very, very down and dirty. But I'm just saying, like, if there's the technical bits, why people would prefer one or the other, and then there's the high level bits, which is like licensing and easy integration. Yeah.
No, definitely. I think it's always fun to learn new technology. My dentist would be cleaning my teeth, and he'd say something like, 10 syllables long, and he'd like, I'm talking nerdy to you, John.
Yeah. It's when those dentists go, oh, which number is it? Which are your teeth? And I'm like, I don't know what you're doing when you're saying numbers and when you're checking my teeth. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Ginger Bill, what is the current status of Odin? Should people start building things with Odin?
Well, to answer the second point first, many people are already doing so. My main current job now is actually programming in Odin. So I work with DjangoFX, which is the developer of EmberGen, which is a real-time volumetric fluid simulation for games and films. It's a software that allows you to make explosions and smoke and fire and stuff like that. It's a very cool piece of software, and that's all being developed in Odin itself. The team we're on is about 10 or 11, 12 people, depending on how you count. And of those developers, 6 of them are developing in Odin full-time, which is absolutely amazing. It's surreal, I'll tell you that.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So the current status is pretty good. The language, I'm very careful. So I'm making a separation between the language, the libraries, the compiler, and the ecosystem. The language is about done. It has been about done for about a year. There's some new stuff I've been adding here and there, some new features. Like literally the other day, I added swizzling to the language. So having an array, you can do swizzlings like if you're in a shaded language, because there's an operations that already do that on the hardware. Like you can do shuffle a vector around very easy with a mask. So it's like, I give that to a nice, elegant way to the user to do that with standard arrays, and it just works perfectly. So people are used to it. It's lovely. So some minor things like that, but it doesn't change the entire aspect of the language. The compiler is not 100% kind of like done or ready to be there, but it's good enough for that. We need to make sure when we are done with the language, we write specification, make sure the compiler adheres to it. The other things like the core library and the tooling, there are still a lot of work to there. The core library is getting fleshed out by the day. There's been recently new stuff adding that. For instance, we've got some image stuff like that, and also compression, and some people work on cryptography things, going through all of that. There's a lot to actually keep fleshing out what we want from the core library. Effectively, the idea of Odin is to get kind of like batteries included, so most of the stuff you want to do will be in the core library for you, rather than you having to rely on many third-party stuff. But again, third-party stuff will be required for many other things. For tooling wise, there's a lot of other things we're building. For instance, at the moment, one person is developing the Odin FUMT, the Odin formatter. So you got your code, you put it through FUMT, it gives you the style formatted correctly for you. You remove that bike shedding argument entirely. Don't have to worry about if you're using tabs or spaces or where your brace style is. The formatter will just format it correctly for you. Remove that argument entirely. It's a nice little thing. I know some people say, oh, it's a bit annoying. I'm like, yeah, you can turn it off. You don't have to use it, but we'll be using it for the core library at least to make sure everything's consistent. And it also will help with transitions to anything else for other people. Yeah, there's a lot of things. Literally yesterday, someone said they wanted to be making a package manager for Odin, which is great. So there's many different things coming along in the time.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you piqued my interest.
Yeah.
The 6 people talking about 6 people.
Yes.
So there are currently 6 Odin jobs.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
I know it is great.
So is that something, that program, can you use that in Blender? Is it for games specifically? What's it for?
So this program is EmberGen itself. So it's a volumetric thing. So 3D simulations of smoking games. So you can export this in EmberGen. Export your simulations to either a flipbook or a VDB, OpenVDB format. So the OpenVDB bit you can put into your like Blender or Maya or Open Cinema 4D and render it there if you need to. Or we have a built-in renderer, which is very real-time and everything, by the way. So you then render that to a flipbook, which then you can put into games like Unreal or Unity and such, where flipbooks are pre-processed, you don't have to render them. So this is very useful for that. So that's how it's good. And people are enjoying the software. They're very much loving it.
Good. That's kind of the main questions that I had for Ginger Bill here.
Yeah.
Is there, how can people get involved with your project? Where's the best way to meet?
Well, the best place to talk is first go onto the website, which is odinlang.org. That's where we've got a lot of the stuff on there. You can find out other places to find, such as the general community in general. We're many people very active on the Odin Discord. I also recommend checking out the GitHub for Odin. So that's where the source is, where the development is happening. There's also a wiki on there, as well as a discussions board on there, because GitHub has recently added that, so we've added that as well. So it's very, very useful. So they're a very good place to do. You can always contact me as well, which would just be bill@odin-lang.org. That's one way of contacting me. You can find that on the website. It's very easy to do so. But yeah, there's many places where people can help out. Please, just trying out the language is one good thing. Reporting any bugs or criticisms or like improvements you can do. You can always contribute to the code base. It's always welcome. And just helping other people out as well. Helping other people who are new to it. That's always a great thing to do with the community.
Okay. Well, Ginger Bill, thank you for your time. It's been a lot of fun.
No, thank you.
Your project is one that I think is absolutely fantastic, and I'm glad we got people working on it, because it'll be cool to see where it goes.
Yes.
And with that, I suppose unless you have a closing thought, I guess we'll close the interview out.
Yeah, I'll just end with again, try out Odin if you like. Try and see if you enjoy it. Please, again, with any language, just try it out and see what it is, and try and treat it like it the way it wants to be treated. Odin has many different things that are very different to other languages, but it's been designed in a way that it will feel extremely natural. It will feel like intuitive to use, and you won't be fighting it all the time. It's got some very high-level concepts already in the language. You've got basic data structures. You've got structs, enums, unions, which are like discriminated unions, by the way. You've got bit sets, which are a better alternative to using like bit flags. Like these, like instead of using like enums as flags, and like no, bit sets are pretty much what you use. And interestingly, most people's favorite feature when you ask them will go to, I love bit sets in Odin. I'm like, oh, okay, there's such a minor thing, but it's just so powerful. It's like, oh, okay, there's Odin has full-on Unicode support, so source code is soon to be UTF-8, which means you can have Unicode identifiers. There is a high level of the context system, which is the implicit context system, which is you pass an implicit value through every single procedure when it holds stuff like, for instance, the current context allocator or the temporary allocator or the logger, and many other things in there, which allows you to a huge control over your actual program, and also third parties code as well, like intercepting how a third party allocates something, or just understanding how it does and tracking it. You can do that with the context system very, very easily. Odin again is a manual management and stuff like this, so you have a huge amount of control of your memory layout, memory allocations, and understanding and reasoning about your program. So again, highly recommend everyone try out Odin. Just go onto odinlang.org and download probably the latest build.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Ginger Bill. I guess with that, we'll conclude the interview.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Joshua.